G'day, today's video is about Silent Service 2, one of my favourite games from the early MS-DOS era. It was made by Microprose in 1990 and we got it in about 1991 I think. It was one of the first commercial games we owned. It came in a pack of 4 games called Combat Action. It had a set of detailed instructions and a map of the Pacific Theatre in the box, along with all the instruction books for the other games as well. The footage I've got here in the background is of me playing a war patrol. The sections where I'm sailing the submarine around the map are sped up so that we don't have to sit through them. Now, Silent Service is awesome because it's a fairly accurate simulation in many ways. You get messages about what's happening during the war that help guide your operations. Things like the port of Manila falling can affect where your submarine can dock, and it can make it a problem for you if you need to get back and you run out of fuel. Fortunately, you get towed back if that happens. The time period dictates which submarines and torpedoes are available, and the submarines that you sail are real submarines with the real stats, such as the Narwhal with 2 6-inch guns, which is pretty impressive for a submarine of the time. But the submarine that I usually pick is the Gato. Now, the Gato was one of the most ubiquitous submarines of the period, and it did a lot of damage to Japanese shipping. When you pick a submarine, you get to pick what kind of torpedoes that you can use. The game has 2 basic settings, historical and flawless torpedoes. The historical setting is for if you want to play with the notoriously bad Mark 14 torpedoes that were at the start of World War II. The Mark 14s had some serious issues with their magnetic detonators, which basically meant that they didn't work a lot of the time. So if you play with historical torpedoes, you need to be prepared for a lot of duds. Later on in the war, this gets fixed, and you can get some electric torpedoes as well. The electric torpedoes are good because they don't leave a bubble trail in the water, so they're harder to spot by the enemy vessels. They are a little bit slower though, so it does take a bit more cunning to get a torpedo hit. There are some limitations with the game, unfortunately. Being a DOS game, there just isn't the memory for a full Japanese fleet to be stored in memory at once. So you'll notice that there's only one type of standard battleship and only one type of carrier and only one type of heavy cruiser, even though the Japanese fleet certainly had more than one type of each. In general, the pace of the game is fairly slow, but you can accelerate time when things get a little bit boring and you want things to pass quicker. The first phase of most battles is sneaking into a good launching position. In this first battle, that doesn't go so well for me because it's very poor visibility, so I end up actually not finding the targets until I was very, very close. So close, in fact, that the destroyers spotted me almost immediately. This is because I don't have radar. Later in the war I'll get radar, and then I don't have that as a problem. I would spot the ships from much further away. So normally you would try and position yourself in a good launching position. Usually this is to the broadside of the ships, but that's not always possible because you're so slow. You need to get close to them, and if you can't get close to them, you're very unlikely to get a hit. So often I end up basically shooting torpedoes at the ships from roughly off one of the bow quarters. With the faster ships like the carriers or fast transports or even battleships, you have to make sure that your torpedoes count, because they often can get away and you can't catch up to them after the escorts have had their way with you. It's best to save your torpedoes where you can because you have a very limited supply. You have 2 separate supplies, one in the bow and one in the stern. The bow supply is much more convenient to use, obviously, because you're driving your ship towards whatever your target is. The stern tubes are often more difficult to use, but it's a good idea to use them when you can, as those torpedoes could be used if they were in the bow tubes much more easier when you've got a large target. It's best to save the torpedoes in the bow section for when you really need them. Sometimes you'll find targets such as transport ships that don't really pose much of a threat to you. Sure, they have guns and they can shoot back, but generally you can usually sink them in a gunnery duel. A gunnery duel involves adjusting the gun elevation depending on the fall of shot. Each time you shoot your gun, it takes a while for the shell to get to the target ship. And when it gets there, it either hits or it lands long or short. And you have to adjust the elevation of the gun relative to the standard elevation for the range so that you hit the target. Using your gun is a good way of sinking ships whilst conserving your torpedo supply that is so very precious. Once you've made your torpedo launch, usually you get discovered either when your torpedo hits, you get spotted, or a torpedo is spotted. At that point, it's time to evade and make a good escape. There's pretty much only one way to go for that. The best way to go is to dive as deep as you can, and that makes it harder for them to find you on their sonar. It's also best to go at a relatively slow speed or stopped, because that reduces your sonar detectability as well. If you go deep enough, you can get below what's called the thermal layer. You may notice I look at the gauges screen during my gameplay, and it's because I'm looking for the temperature gauge dropping when I'm going deep enough. Once you go below the thermal layer, that reflects the sonar waves, and it makes it even more difficult for the enemy destroyers to find you. That's actually a pretty impressive thing that they've included it in this submarine simulation. You wouldn't think that that would be a normal part of it. So once you've dived deep, you basically go slow and stay quiet to avoid being found, and hopefully you'll survive and the enemy destroyers will eventually go away. At that point, you can come up to the surface or just periscope depth and have a look around and see if anyone's still around. Sometimes you'll find a crippled ship that needs finishing off. Surprisingly, the destroyers do not stay around to guard them. So that's a quick look at one of my favourite games, Silent Service. We played it a lot when I was a child, and it's definitely very immersive. You definitely feel a lot of tension, especially when you're trying to pull off a big attack against a large carrier group or a lot of battleships. It's also very tense when you're trying to escape as well from a group of destroyers. Later in this gameplay, you'll actually see me run into just a destroyer escort running around on its own, looking for submarines to kill. I do manage to escape though. Okay, here I've found a large target. Let's take a look and see how this battle goes. Okay, let's go to the periscope and have a look. I can tell from here it looks like we've got at least a carrier and perhaps another larger ship behind it. I notice that the carrier and the other ships are all going much faster than I do, so I've only really got one good shot at sinking them. We just got to basically get ourselves in a good position and then launch our torpedoes. Okay, I think we can launch our torpedoes. I think we're close enough. The carrier is moving towards us, so I think it should close the range a bit before the torpedoes intercept it. I could select long-range torpedoes, but generally the faster short-range ones work better. Okay, send some off the heavy cruiser. Okay, the destroyer should spot those torpedoes soon and we should try to get out of here. Yep, there he goes, he spotted it. Time to get away. Oh, one of the torpedoes hit the destroyer. I'm guessing that I probably won't hit the heavy cruiser then very well. But I do seem to have hit the carrier with 2 torpedoes. Or maybe I should have launched a 3rd one, because sometimes 2 isn't enough. It seems to have stopped, so maybe I don't need to worry about it. Okay, let's see if we can get below that thermal layer. There we go. Now it's just a matter of patience and waiting for the escort to go away. I'm sure in real life the escort wouldn't have buggered off with a carrier still hanging around. Oh, I think that noise might have been the carrier exploding and ready to sink. Yep, it seems the carrier sunk. Okay, I suppose I can accelerate time and wait until the escorts go away. Okay, I think that's about the end of the battle. Just got to get far enough away from that destroyer. Oh, I did get some points for damaging the destroyer and the heavy cruiser, but it's mostly the carrier that was the prize there. Okay, let's go look for another target. Okay. It doesn't look that promising. There's only 2 ships. Just a destroyer and a transport. The problem here is that the transport here is going faster than I can go underwater, and it's in a position that I may find it difficult to catch up to them with. We'll see if we can get close enough underwater, and if we can't, we'll do it on the surface. See, they're turning away. It's a part of something called a zigzag maneuver. It's something that ships did to avoid being torpedoed by submarines. if I waited long enough, they might turn back around more towards me, but I think that would probably take quite a long time. So I think what I'll do is I'll surface, and I'll try and get around them using my faster diesel engines. Okay, I think I'm far enough in front of them that I can dive and get ready for an attack. I'm going to try and use my stern tubes if I can. Torpedoes away! It's not the best firing position because the ship is roughly end on, and you'll see that the first torpedo misses, but I think the second one hits, so we eventually get the ship anyway. Yep, there it goes. Now we just gotta escape the escort ship. Looking to get below the thermal layer again. I'm also noticing I'm running fairly low on torpedoes. I've only got 7 left on the bow and 5 left in total in the stern. And I'm getting fairly low on fuel as well. Oh, no wonder we're not escaping the destroyer. Given my low fuel supply and that I can't dock at Manila, might be best to head home. But first, let's take a look at this target. Okay, I think this might be a destroyer escort group looking for submarine to sink. Let's just take a look around and see if we can spot anything worth shooting at. I don't seem to see anything. No, I think we better dive and try to escape. Oh, they got some depth charges onto me. A leaking fuel tank is probably not the best thing to have now. The numbers of interest here are the distance that we're visible at, the distance that we're visible from, particularly for the sonar values. Okay, it seems like they've given up. Yeah, definitely just a group that were hunting submarines. Okay. Oh, a large target. I think I might be able to get away with one more. It looks like it's a carrier. But I don't see any other large ships around it yet. Yeah, it just seems to be a carrier with 3 destroyer escorts. We're already in a fairly good firing position, so I think I'll just fire and try to escape. Time to dive and evade even before they've detected me. We got some good hits. I don't know if the carrier has sunk though. Oh, I've gone too deep. Okay, that's better. You got to watch out for that. They have a maximum test depth. If you go deeper than the test depth, you gradually take damage. Looks like the carrier sunk. We just got to make our escape. Okay, looks like we made a good escape. I think now that I've sunk that carrier, I need to try and make it back to port. I don't have enough fuel left. And I don't really have enough torpedoes for another large target. Let's see if we can manage to get there. I'm going to go for Fremantle. We only just made it. Those little flags in the submarine means we probably get a medal. Cool. That's a pretty good score. Of course I didn't use... Oh! I got the Navy Cross. I usually only get a Bronze Star or a Silver Star, but that's pretty good. Probably one of my better efforts. Anyhow, that's the end of the War Patrol. And the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.